Hello and welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. Chess has given me so much over the years. It's allowed me to meet people all around the world from different cultures. It's like a universal language that people from around the world speak. It's taught me the importance of principle in chess and life more broadly. It's taught me how to win graciously, I hope. And it's taught me how to lose and to learn from my losses, to analyse my losses and learn from my losses. And in the following game, there's a lot to learn from. So this is a game I played against Graham Cluley. Graham, by day, is an expert in online computer security, and you can trust him. You can also trust him to play good chess. So we're going to look at a game that Graham and I played. So in this game, I have the black pieces and Graham has the white pieces. He opens up with pawn d4. This is a good move, allowing that queen's bishop to come out and starting to control and influence the centre. For instance, stopping me play pawn e5 because he'll take it. Although you can play that, but it's a dubious gambit, to say the least. Black plays knight f6, stopping white getting this ideal centre with e4, and we'll talk more about that later. White plays pawn c4, gaining space on the queen side. There's other moves you can play here. You can play bishop f4, a London system. You can play bishop g5, the Trumpowski. But Graham keeps it classical and plays c4. I play pawn to e6. So this is allowing all sorts of moves from black. Black can aim for a Benoni defence. Black can even aim for a Queen's Gambit decline by moving forward that Queen's pawn, or a Nimzo Indian or a Queen's Indian. Graham plays what I would call the maximalist move, knight c3. So what White's aiming for here is pawn e4. It's the ambitious idea to gain control of the centre. Black can stop that by pawn d5, Queen's Gambit declined. But Black can also stop it by bishop b4, pinning the knight. So now pawn e4 doesn't work, because if Black takes, White cannot take back, because the knight is pinned against the king. And losing your king is considered bad manners in chess. So White plays bishop d2. Now, this move wasn't played until quite recently. I mean, it was played, but not very often. And the reason people didn't used to play it is because, the bishop just looks a bit sad there. So on g5 or on f4, which is where you'd put it in the Queen's Gambit, it's just doing more. Here, it's breaking the pin, but not much more, and also that pawn's undefended. So bishop d2 used to be rarely played, but now it's quite common. And the reason it's common is that in the Nimzo Indian defence, if we go back a move, what Black is often offering to do is to take that knight. So that's giving White a pair of double pawns, which is a structural weakness. And in exchange, Black gives up the two bishops. So Black gives up a bishop for a knight, which gives White a slight advantage. So White gets the advantage of the two bishops, but White has to have a doubled pawn. So it's kind of a swap. Whether it's a fair swap, that's at the heart of the debate about the opening. But by playing bishop d2, now if Black takes, White can take back with the bishop. He's got the advantage of the two bishops, but not double pawns. Black castles. White still can't play e4, because if White plays e4, Black will take the knight, White takes back, and then Black picks up the pawn. So White plays the next best move, which is e3. So just modestly advances the pawn to e3. Black plays pawn b6. Now the logic to this move is essentially just to get this queen's bishop out. So at the moment, the bishop's blocked in by these two pawns, and that's not completely terminal, because Black could push the queen's pawn. So on this move, Black could push the queen's pawn, and then if takes, this bishop can actually escape onto this diagonal. But if White doesn't take, then this bishop has fewer options. So Black just says, I'm not waiting for all of that, I'm just going to let the bishop out. So on b6, on b7, this bishop will influence all of these central squares, and also will be sort of perhaps pointing at the castled king, if White castles that side. White plays pawn a3, so putting the question to that bishop, saying, what's that bishop going to do? It could go back to e7, but if it does, White can finally play e4, defended by the knight, and dominate the centre. So Black chooses to takes back with the bishop to stop the double pawns, and now Black is playing bishop b7. So there's really good control over the e4 square. Certainly White can't play e4, because now Black would take with either the knight or the bishop. So there's no e4 for White. So white plays knight f3. Again, a really logical move, because developing the bishop here would not work, because then black can take the pawn and later take the rook. That used to happen a lot in games against my dad when I was young. My dad would always be taking this pawn with his bishop and then taking a rook afterwards. So annoying. But Graham doesn't fall for that. Graham brings out his king's knight onto the best square and also stops this bishop from attacking this g2 pawn. Black places the knight in the centre, so black is going to continue to control the c4 square, very important in this opening, and also attacking this bishop on c3, threatening to take back the advantage of the two bishops, or neutralise white's two bishops by taking one of them. If any of you are wondering what that small brown thing is in the background, that's a dog on the bed, just curled up. And at some stage, maybe it'll start moving around and stuff, but right now what you're seeing is a curled up dog on a blanket, just in case you were wondering. But you probably are watching the chess. Anyway, queen c2. So this is a standard move in these kind of queen's pawn positions, allows the rook to move across, you know, possibly aiming for either important e4 square or even the h7 square. Is everyone looking at the dog now and just wondering if they can make out that it's a dog? Maybe not. Black plays pawn d6. So the idea of this move is to let out the black knight. So the knight would like to develop. If we look before I play d6, a6 isn't great because there's nowhere really to hop to. These squares are covered. c6 is possible, but it's blocking in the c-pawn and blocking the bishop. This doesn't feel right. So d6 is a nice move. I saw Magnus Carlsen play this in a game. Not quite the same position probably, but a similar position. And seemed to work out well for him. So why not? You know, just copy the good people. That's what I say. The dog's moved. Next, white plays bishop d3. So now he's attacking that knight twice, and it's only defended once by the bishop, so one has to take action. And the action I'm going to take is to play f5, defending the knight with a pawn. So this knight is now twice defended and twice attacked. And what you're doing is sort of shoring up this strong position in the centre, stopping white expanding. White plays bishop e2, which is a really far-sighted move, because basically where it was on d3, it couldn't do much because that pawn was blocking it. So here, it's got more to do because it's defending that knight. That knight could well come under attack from this bishop. Like next move, for instance, I could take, and when white takes back, take the knight and disrupt the kingside pawns. And now the bishop can take back. So that's better. And in fact, at the moment, it would take back and now then be facing down onto my rook, which would be really embarrassing. So it's a good move. I developed my last piece as planned. White brings a rook onto d1. Now, this is a smart move because the rook and the queen are opposite each other, which is always handy in chess. So if those two pawns and the knight weren't there, the rook would take the queen. Well, it's black's move, but if it were white's move and the two pawns and the knight weren't there, the rook could take the queen, which would be great for white. But these pawns can come off quite quickly, actually, in chess, and things can happen quite quickly. And what it's doing is just storing up threats for the future, which is always very wise. This is the moment when black has to make a plan. Black has developed all of his pieces, and now he has to think of something constructive and active to do. So what I did here was I basically said, look, this bishop is facing onto the king's side. White king's going to end up here. We're going to aggressively attack on the king's side by advancing these pawns. Now, there are some openings this works in. It works on the black side of the King's Indian defence. It works for white in some lines in the Sicilian defence, in the Sicilian Najdorf sometimes, or the Schwenningen. So it sometimes does work, but in general in chess, you're not meant to advance the pawns in front of your king. And looking at this game, we'll see why. So black just goes for it. G5, looks aggressive, gains a bunch of space, and kind of bears down on the king. White says, okay, white castles into it. So white says, let's see what you've got. I'm going to castle into this. I don't believe it. I think that's what white thought. Anyway, Graham, tell me in the comments. Black takes on c3. White takes back with the queen, preserving the pawn structure. It's always good to have a nice pawn structure. Black just keeps on going. Pawn g4. The white knight retreats, is attacked. It retreats here to e1. And then black basically lifts a rook. So rook f6. You're lifting a rook. So the idea here is this rook can come across to the g file, to the h file, even possibly you can double on the f file. It's just thinking of more aggressive options. I mean, I suppose if black had 3 moves, you'd go rook h6, queen h4, queen h2 checkmate. So in 3 moves time, black's winning, but unfortunately that's not how chess works. So white plays an excellent move here. Pawn f3 is a splendid move because he's challenging that pawn, which is taking away a square from the knight, and he's also trying to get his bishop out onto that diagonal to neutralise the black bishop. So this is a defensive, also creates some space for the king. That square could come in handy, who knows. Black consistently, no compromise, pawn h5, so he's defending this advanced pawn. And then white basically centralises this knight. Again, this is a principled move. So in the King's Indian, the same sort of thing happens, which is the white knight comes from f3, retreats to e1, and then comes back to the central square d3. On this square, he's got all sorts of options, places he can jump to. He can jump to f4. He can support a c5 push, and actually we'll see both of those things end up being important. So this square d3 has got loads of options, plus he's allowing the rooks to connect, he's reducing congestion. So this is a really smart move. Black plays queen e7, allowing this rook to come into play, although it's a little bit slow actually, I think that, a little bit slow. White's playing pawn b4. Now white has a long-term plan, an excellent plan, and basically what white's trying to do is to break through on the queen side and in the centre. And in general, when people attack on the wings in chess, which is what I'm doing, the sensible thing to do is to try to get a central breakthrough, which is what white's playing for. So black brings his a rook to f8, and this looks like the right sort of idea, doubling the rooks on the f-file, and often in chess it's good to double the rooks on the f-file. In this case I don't think it's so good, because the only person who can open the f-file is white. White can open the f-file by taking there, and then black takes back. So it's not in black's gift. And anyway, even if the f-file was open, this rook at the back is well defended 1, 2, 3 times, only attacked twice. So it's not really sure what black's even hoping for here. It's not clear. White plays c5. I mean, I'm beating myself up a bit here, you know, it's alright, I can deal with it. White plays c5, it's a good move, it's defended 1, 2, 3, 4 times, it's attacked 1, 2, 3, 4 times, so it's not losing material. If it pushes one more square, it will fork the bishop and knight, which will be catastrophic and be the end of the game. And generally, it's just threatening to open lines, which, in fact, not just threatening, it will open lines, which is going to cause black some problems. I decide to take on f3, basically trying to open the g-file and seeing if I can cause some trouble down the g-file. White takes back with the bishop, quite correctly, so now he's challenging this powerful bishop. If I back off, that's very passive. So I just exchange. But now all of a sudden, white's lifted his rook, and actually this rook can come onto here with check. So all of a sudden, this g-file, which I opened with the hope of being aggressive, is actually now looking like it's more useful to white than black. And already the computers are starting to think that white's got the better of this, correctly. I bring my rook here, not really as an aggressive option, actually it's more of a defensive option in case there's a check down this file. White moves a knight to f4, and what we see here is white has made a sequence of good strategic choices, and now the tactics start to appear for white. So all of a sudden black's position feels fragile and it feels very hard to hold together, and in a short few moves it will entirely collapse. So white moves here attacking this pawn, simply attacking a pawn. Black defends it with the rook. But, you know, tying down a rook like this just to defend a pawn from a knight is not a great use of a rook anyway. You know, it's not on an open file. It just feels a bit passive. White exchanges these pawns, opening another highway for his pieces. So, on balance, you say this is more used to white than black. This is much more used to white than black. He's got complete control of this file. So, white is starting to open up the... and also, just look at black's king, all airy and open, and white's all kind of snug behind its pawns. Check from white on the open file. Black puts a rook in the way. Check from white down this, across the rank, using this file. The black king runs to the corner. Now, it's all over here for black. It happened very, very quickly. And you might be able to see why. And you might want to pause the video and think about why, or you might just want to watch it unfold. So, rook takes on g7, check. Queen takes back, and then white's move is just to involve the last piece that's not currently active, that's not currently doing something. So just to move that rook onto that open C line, this open highway which white controls. So the threat is rook c7, which would attack that knight twice, and the knight cannot move because then the rook is going to take the queen, or it's going to take the king. So this is an enormous problem for black, and what black comes up with is rook f6. So the idea being now, if you play rook c7, the rook can come in here, defend the knight, and also break the pin, so the rook is no longer pinning the knight against the queen or the king, because there's no time to move away the queen and the king, and there's nowhere to move the king, because the queen's cutting off here, the knight's cutting off there, the rook was there. It's all so cluttered. The problem with this move, rook f6, is people who have seen the most recent video on strategy and tactics, the last video I posted, will know, or anyway, lots of chess players will know that white has a knight fork. I don't quite know why I thought Graham would miss that. I knew he'd find it, but I suppose I just played on one more move just to see. Knight takes pawn, forks the rook and the queen, so at least winning a rook for a knight here, but it's actually worse than that, because once this queen starts moving, there's nothing defending this knight, so the queen will pick up this knight. So this position is entirely collapsed. And this was a good time for black to resign and congratulate his opponent. So a great game from Graham there, and a very principled game. And I think what it taught me, well, it was the importance of developing a plan. And I developed a plan in the position, but it wasn't quite appropriate for that position and quite that opening. It works in the King's Indian, that sort of thing. In the Mardel Platter version of the King's Indian, where white locks the centre, it's a beautiful approach and has produced lots of fascinating games. In that particular position, it just wasn't right, because the pieces just weren't really backing up the pawns, you know, and actually, when the game opened, it was more to white's benefit than black's. Anyway, that's the chess done. Now, here's a much more important question. Top. So, on the left, we see Chewbacca the dog, and on the right, we see Archie, Graham's poodle. And so, I've just got a very simple question, really, for the viewers of this channel, which is, which dog is the cutest? I mean, they're both cute, right? They're cute dogs. Which of these dogs is the cutest? If you could, which of these, this is not an offer by the way, which of these dogs would you take home? And while you're thinking about it, I'm going to open a packet of beef, sliced beef, British beef slices, and it smells really good. And I'm going to wave it around, maybe make a bit of noise. Chewy! There he is. Chewy! Look what I got for you. Oh. So I don't want to influence people's opinions or like change the vote, and it's hard, isn't it? Because Archie's not on here eating a piece of beef. But what I'm just asking you is a very simple question, which is, which dog is the cutest? Please leave your questions in. Please leave your answers in the comments, and also your congratulations to Graham. Well played, Graham. When I actually lost this game, I believe I closed my account on chess.com and gave up chess forever. But since then, I've tried to grow up a bit, and I've decided the best way to process this is to make a video on YouTube when I tell you all about it. I've decided that's a better way to handle it. Anyway, I very much hope you enjoyed the game and the video, and hope to see you soon. Say bye, Chewy. Ruff, ruff.